And welcome again to everybody. The to start out with a couple of announcements. Cell phone turned down, please. We're announcing that the book festival is free, as you know, but we welcome and need donations so that in order to make this happen and that we can make it happen again. The donations can be made at the information tent, which is directly behind us. Also, we're nearing the end, but there's still a couple more presentations, and then in this tent at 3:30 there'll be a panel discussion on why are we still talking about this. The title. Yes, why are we still talking about this reproductive rights and women's equality? And it'll be with Dr. Willie Parker and Deborah Tannen, who's our next speaker, and Jillian Thomas, who just spoke before her. So before I go on, I'm just going to introduce Robin Young, who will be then introducing our speaker. Robin is on Here and Now at WBUR, so she's with NPR, and so many of you may have already heard her voice, but now you get to see her face. Thank you.
Thank you. And what a pleasure it is to introduce Deborah, who I've interviewed so many times. This is such a perfect thing for those of us at WBUR and NPR because we read books like people eat. You know, authors often come on our show and say, wait, you read it? Yeah, we read it. And Deborah Tannen, in particular, is our national interpreter, not helping us navigate the different languages that we all speak in this country, but helping us navigate inside the ones we think we have in common. She helped us see that in speaking one language, we are not. We are often speaking different languages. A professor of linguistics at Georgetown University. She's also been the McGraw Distinguished Lecturer at Princeton and a fellow there. And she'd written several scholarly tracts on how we speak to each other, how we discourse, how we communicate or don't. But then she wrote her first general audience book, That's Not What I Meant, How Conversational Style Makes or Breaks Relationships. And she tells me that she thought that was going to be the book that was going to change the world. It was going to convince people that language was the key, not psychology. That didn't happen with that book, but then in 1990, it did. She really did change the world. She wrote, You Just Don't Understand, Women and Men in Conversation. It ignited debate within the linguistics community, but also in living rooms. Because Deborah was one of the first to point out what linguistically some knew, which was that men do not stop when they are lost to get directions. She said this on the Today Show. Phil Donahue heard it. Boom. I mean, it was just, of course, most of us knew that, but she articulated it, and it took it down the linguistic rabbit hole it led her. She was also one of the first to really point out that women want to talk to people to work through emotional problems. But when women do this with men, particularly in the 90s when this thinking was first being explored, men immediately want to fix the problem, make it go away. They still do, I just heard. Women didn't want that. They wanted to be listened to. This is what Deborah Tannen did. She made this widespread knowledge and conversation. Then came the many other books. The Argument Culture, Stopping America's War of Words. You Wearing That, which is about mothers and daughters. You Were Always Mom's Favorite, which was about siblings. And now her new book, which explores the romance of women's friendships, as The Atlantic put it. It's appropriately titled, You're the Only One, as in, you're the only one I would ever tell this to. Who hasn't said that to their best friend, whether you were 10 or 50 years old? You're the only one I can tell, the full title, Inside the Language of Women's Friendships. And again, we learn how different that relationship is for women than it is for men. I know she's going to be discussing this at length, but one of the examples that I saw that I really took away is that when women are having a negative interaction with other women, maybe women that were supposed to be their friends, it drives their blood pressure right up. Men have a bad interaction with somebody who's supposed to be their friends, nothing. Rolls right off them. So it's with great pleasure I introduce someone who really has been a superstar in the linguistics world and has also really helped us try to actually listen to and understand what we are trying to say to each other. Professor Deborah Tannen.
Thank you so much. Is this working? I had actually intended to speak from there because kind of like to have some things I'd be reading and I would like to be at a podium. But I saw everybody straining their necks and that doesn't seem fair, so I'll talk from here. Delightful to be here in Martha's Vineyard, my first time here. Everybody has been so welcoming and what a great event this festival is. I'm going to be talking today about friendships between women in particular, but also saying a lot of things in comparison about friendships between men. So I want to say right at the start, as I do about whenever I talk on just about any topic I talk about, nothing is true of all women and men. We have many other influences on our style other than our gender. I have written about many of them: regional, ethnic, class, sexual orientation, so many influences on our style. Gender is one, and so there are patterns. Some of you may hear what I say and think, yeah, that's me, and some may think, no, I'm not like that at all, but still, these are patterns, and it's interesting to think how we compare. Let me start with a conversation that a woman told me about that she had with her adult son that captures some of these differences between women's and men's friendships and the kind of conversations they have. So her son had just recently graduated from college, living in a distant city, and she was asking him about a good friend of his that she also knew quite well. And it went something like this. Have you talked to Mike lately? Yeah, talked to him yesterday. How's he doing? I don't know. But you just talked to him, didn't he say? Nope. Well, how's his job? I don't know. How's his girlfriend? Don't know. Well, what did you talk about? Football. Did you only talk about football? No, soccer too. It would be pretty unusual for two close women friends, this was one of his close friends, to have a talk and have no idea what's going on in the other person's life. How's his work? How's his girlfriend? Because this is the currency of many women's friendships. And it's almost an obligation of friends to know what's going on in your life and an obligation to tell your friends what's going on in your life. Somebody that heard me give this example commented, he said, yeah, that kind of explained, this is an adult, he and his wife, he said they're friends with another couple. He hangs out with the guy, wife hangs out with the woman. And one evening his wife said to him, isn't that terrible that they're getting a divorce? He had no idea. And what he said to me was, well, we played tennis every week, but the topic of his marriage never came up. And that would be unusual among women friends. So friendships among women, we tend to talk more often, and talk about more personal topics. And that means it is both a gift and also there are risks involved. I say it can be a gift to talk about personal things and particular things that might be bothering you. A woman commented to me, and friendships are, I think have been understudied in a way. When I wrote about mothers and daughters and about sisters, I found many, many books on that subject, but a lot fewer about women's friendships. And a woman was telling me how terrible she felt that a very close friend of hers had passed away. And she said almost the worst thing about it was that she couldn't call her up and tell her how bad she felt about her dying. Because this is the kind of comfort that you would expect to get from a close friend. I teach at Georgetown University, and I have my students bring in conversations that they have had or observed, usually conversations they've had, and they write them up and they analyze them in terms of the kinds of phenomena we've been talking about in class. So in all my books, this one I'm talking about now, but many others as well, I will use some of these examples that my students have given me, and I want to say always with always with permission. But this is what one young woman wrote. She said, Saturday night after a party, a group of us went to Matt's house to hang out before we went home to bed. I and the other girls proceeded to sit down on the couch, and we began talking about the night, what we thought was fun, what we wished had happened. I was in the middle of giving my friend Sarah advice about a boy when all of a sudden the coffee table was pushed out of the way and the guys began to wrestle, throwing each other on the couch, pushing each other off chairs. It was funny for me to see my big guy friends wrestling as if they were 5-year-olds. But it also struck me that this is how we chose to relax. The girls began talking, and the guys got up and started fighting. I commented to her, yeah, the guys were acting like 5-year-olds, but she and her friends were acting like 5-year-olds too. They were acting like 5-year-old girls. Sitting and talking is something that girls tend to do more than boys. There's this iconic picture of two little girls, and one is whispering in the other's ear. And I actually collect pictures of this, and I have got them from all over the world. I have yet to encounter a picture of two boys, and one is whispering in the other's ear. She was, and all this talk is, again, something that is the source of the greatest comfort of women's friendships, but also the greatest challenges. So let me start with the comfort. This is another story a woman told me. I should say I interviewed 80 girls and women, mostly women, ranging from 9 to 97. So there was a range in ages, and also a range of class, ethnicity, region, countries, but not to compare people of different backgrounds, just to get a range of experience. So she was a woman in her 80s. She recalled when her kids were small, she had a neighbor who's had a kid the same age as hers. The neighbor called her up one day, and she was really kind of upset. Her little boy had dropped a jar of mayonnaise, spread the mayonnaise all over the floor, added eggs because he was going to make a cake. Her neighbor called her up, asked if she was free. She was, and she came over, and what the woman told me was she just came over and she left the mess, and we just drank coffee and commiserated. And I love that word, commiserated. Commiserated, you share your misery, and somehow that makes it better. And that's a type of talk that is very common among women friends. In fact, we linguists who study this sort of thing have a term for it, technical term, troubles talk. Talking about troubles, about things that are bothering you, is often a big part of women's friendships. And this does seem to be true all over the world. I conducted all those interviews myself, but I do have a student from Kazakhstan, and she was going home for the summer, and she conducted interviews with women from Kazakhstan. And one of them made a comment that I just really thought captured troubles talk so well. She said, and I'm translating into English, when you have talked to someone, it's lighter on the soul. The days seem sunnier, and troubles step back and start seeming smaller. And I think that is a key to the scenario, something I wrote about in the book You Just Didn't Understand, that Robin mentioned is something people picked up on a lot at the time. And that's a conversation where a woman is trying to start troubles talk, tell about a problem to a guy, and then he immediately tells her how to fix it. At the time, what I wrote, and people that commented at the time picked up on, she didn't want a solution, she wanted to talk about it. I don't think that's entirely true. What I would say now is it isn't true that she didn't want a solution. She just didn't want it right off the bat. What would a friend say? Gee, what did he say? And then what did you say? And then what did he say to that? And then how did you feel when he said that? And what did you think you might do? And what do you think he might do? And after asking all those questions, you do work around to a solution. And that first, what I read about that student who said she was sitting on the couch and the girls were talking, she said, I was giving my friend advice about a boy. So it's not accurate to say they don't want advice. You just don't want it right away. And what is so the problem about giving advice right away? And when I write about this, I point out it's as frustrating to the man as it is to the woman. So okay, she's frustrated because she wanted to talk about it. He's frustrated because he thought he's doing what she asked, right? You're telling me about a problem. You must have a reason for telling me. It must be that you want help solving it. And here you are annoyed at me for doing just what you asked me to do. So they're both frustrated. But what's really frustrating, I think, to her is that the solution shuts down the conversation. And it was having the conversation that in itself can be comforting. In all the books I've written, I talk about message and meta-message. So the message is the meaning of the words, but the meta-message is what it says about the relationship that you say these words in this way at this time. So there's a meta-message of caring that comes with that kind of conversation. The fact that somebody, your friend, is interested enough to ask you all these questions and to listen to it and to talk with you about it and to help you figure out a solution is a very treasured meta-message. And that's what gets missing if a guy gives you the solution right away. Now, I have to say, and a lot of this comes from all the men I've talked to as well, and I think particularly of my father, who helped me understand men's points of view, shutting down the conversation could be a secondary gain for him because he doesn't really know how to have those kinds of conversations or what the point is. And it's very frustrating to try to have a conversation that you don't know the point of. There's another kind of talk that is very typical for girls and women's in their friendship, and that is telling secrets, as I mentioned. One woman commented to me, she said, "A close friend knows things about me that other people don't." And someone said, "If she's a really close friend, I tell her everything I think and everything I feel." One woman that I was talking to and interviewing, at one point in our conversation, she said about a particular friend she was telling me about, she said, "She's not that close a friend. I wouldn't tell her about my children's problems." And then elsewhere in the same conversation, she said about another friend, "She isn't that close a friend. I wouldn't tell her what I had for dinner." Now, why is it a sign of close friendship to tell someone what you had for dinner? It's that caring about the details of your life. And this came up also when I wrote about mothers and daughters and about sisters. One woman commented about her mother, "Who else can I tell I got a good deal on toilet paper?" Somebody that cares about the details of your life. And I think this is very relevant, by the way, to social media. And I have a chapter in the book on social media. One of the older women that I was interviewing, again, woman in her 80s, commented, she was criticizing, complaining about social media. Many of the older women I talked to at some point in the interview were complaining about young people and their Instagram and their Facebook and their texting. And she said, "All that stuff out there that nobody needs to know. I don't care what somebody had for dinner." But the truth is she would care if that person was a good friend. And I think that is one of the things about social media that can be very precious. It can give you more ways to stay connected, more ways to be close to the people that you are close to. And being close is I put it this way the other day as well, closeness is the pot of gold at the end of the relationship rainbow. There's a lot of people will tell me that they're close, and that's a good thing. Women would say to me, "I wish we were closer." No one ever said, "I wish we weren't so close." It is considered a very positive thing. But at the same time, social media also ratchets up one of the big liabilities of women's friendships. When women told me about problems they had with friends or how they were hurt by a friend, again, similar to what I found about sisters and mothers and daughters, it was often not being told something, and it was often not being included in something. When you think about it, everybody you are close to, when they are not with you, are with other people, doing things where you aren't. And, we can be hurt a little bit. Someone tells you about a party, you weren't at that party. With social media, you have to see pictures of all the things they were doing with other people and you weren't there. And that can really kind of hurt. Sometimes it can be a major hurt because it was something you should have been invited to and you feel bad you weren't. And sometimes it's just this little minor hurt. But this feeling of being left out is has a lot of emotional impact. And it seems to be more for women than it is for men. So you all have heard the term FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. That's why young people are often checking their Facebook feed or their Instagram feed. And it's why people my age are always checking email. My life went downhill when I got email on my smartphone, because now I got to check it more often in the middle of all kinds of other things. So I have invented 2 new acronyms. FOBLO, FOBLO, fear of being left out. That's worse. With FOMO, you missed the party because you didn't check your phone in time. With FOBLO, you missed the party because you weren't invited. And that's worse. And then there's FOGCO, FOGKO, fear of getting kicked out. Fear that a friend will reject you, fear that a group of friends will reject you. Almost everybody that I talked to had stories from middle school or high school of friends kicking out a member of their group. It's a fear that is well-founded. Groups of girls, when they don't like a girl, they lock her out. And when you think about it, I mean, there's all this talk about mean girls. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If friends are telling secrets and only your friends can know your secrets, you really can't have girls there that you don't want to be friends with because you don't want them to hear your secrets. Groups of boys, if there's a boy they don't like, they let him play. They may treat him badly, but he's not locked out. And kids can be really creative at locking others out. A colleague of mine studied little preschoolers, and she recorded an incident where 2 little girls are playing something, or they're playing house. A third girl wants to join them, and they don't really like her, but in preschool there's often a rule. You can't say you can't play. So they let her play, but this is how it went. They said to the little girl they didn't like, "You can be the baby brother, but you aren't born yet." She got a non-speaking part. Very creative about locking someone out. There are risks to telling secrets, and let me say one more thing about cutoffs. I'm watching the time and want to leave at least some time for questions. The most extreme form of being locked out is a cutoff. And I was really struck by how many women I talked to told me about cutoffs. Now it's sometimes called ghosting, where a friend just disappeared, didn't tell you why she stopped the friendship. And people also told me about deciding to end a friendship where they did the cutting off. And in fact, it was the case that when people told me about cutting off somebody else, they could almost always tell me why. They could always tell me why. When people told me that they were cut off, they usually didn't know why. And that was part of the frustration and the pain of it. That happened to me when I was in high school. I was part of a trio. There were 3 of us that hung around at school all the time. You had to have somebody to eat lunch with. Those were the 2 friends I ate lunch with. And we also saw each other outside of school. We were a pretty tight trio. One day, one of the friends, her name was Susan, stopped talking to me. Never told me why. And the third friend, her name was Marlene, who I'm still friends with, she didn't really remember it. What she remembered is that she tried to stay friends with both of us. Yeah, but if she was going to be friends with Susan, then I couldn't be there. So really, I was locked out. I ended up okay. I made other friends. But it can be quite devastating. And I was struck by how many people told me stories like that. I want to say a bit more about this exchanging secrets. One person put it in a way that I really liked. She said, you know, when you tell a friend something personal, it's like saying, here's a little piece of me. This means I like you. And that's sweet, and I think it captures something. But it also captures that now they have a piece of you, what are they going to do with it? The maybe biggest negative stereotype about women's conversations is the notion of gossip. And I think part of the reason the term gossip is so negative is because it's associated with women. But at the same time, there is a certain kind of gossip that can be harmful. And again, the worst stories that I heard were from school, middle school and high school, where a girl turns on a friend and then uses the information the friend has told her to start gossip in a bad way. But there is good gossip. Talking about other people can be a very positive way to show interest in those people, to talk about, to show caring. One woman told me when her husband died, she said, first of all, she said, my women friends are what got me through. I could not have gotten it through this without my women friends. But she also said, she told me this several years later, she's now happily remarried, that another friend of theirs has suffered the loss of a spouse. And she said she realizes that she and the other women friends are constantly talking about the friend who's going through that. Have you talked to her? How's she doing? And they told her they had been doing that about her when her husband had died. She hadn't quite realized it. Is that gossip? Yeah, in a way it is. It's talking about other people, but in a very constructive way. And I think for many women, talking about other people is interesting because it helps you think through what is life like? What do people, how do they confront the challenges in their life? So I think it can be a very positive thing. But it can be kind of risky. So one woman told me that her mother gave her advice. Her mother said, never give personal information to women who get their hair done every week or play bridge. 10 minutes? She said, when they run out of things to talk about themselves, they will switch to talking about you. And there certainly could be some truth to that. Several women told me they prefer men as friends. And one of the reasons that they gave was they trust the men more not to repeat their secrets. And I don't think it's that men are inherently more trustworthy. I think it's that they don't have anything to gain by repeating the secrets. Girls have a lot to gain by letting it be known that they know something about a popular girl or someone that they are friends with. This is kind of interesting. In commenting on the book You Just Don't Understand, and Women and Men in General, it's frequently commented that men are more competitive. And I do say something to that effect in You Just Don't Understand, but I don't think it's actually correct. We're all competitive. We're just competitive in different ways and about different things. And what many girls and women are very competitive about is who knows what and who knows first. If a friend or a sister tells you about something and you know before the others, you kind of feel like your stock goes up. You're kind of glad to be able to say that. I'm thinking of a sister that I interviewed she was one of 5 sisters. She said whenever they had anything important to convey, they would set up a conference call to avoid the problem that if you said it one at a time, one was going to be the first and the others would be hurt. Are you standing up? No, I have a couple more things to say. We'll leave some time for questions. I'm going to skip the next page. We started a bit late, too. 2 pages, you won't get to here. Let me start to wrap up. So what I try in this book is to understand the dynamics of women's friendships. And as I said, I do talk about how social media has affected this. I have to say social media has, because that's the way it is said, but it's very hard for me. To me, the word media is plural, and I should say social media are. But I talk about that. And I talk a lot about dynamics of sameness and difference. We said a bit about that on the panel the other day. But and I've said a lot today about the negative sides because I think people often want help with things that are challenging. And it is often the case that friendships create problems. A woman that I talked to said 25% of her time in therapy was talking about problems with friends. But it isn't, and often what we talk to friends about is problems with other friends. But it isn't something that we get as much help about, I guess, from books. So I try to offer some help there. But I do want to say that there is so much wonderful about women's friendships, and I do have a lot to say about that as well. A woman who commented, my friendships with women are as essential as air. And I think that comes through in the book too. But it does help to know that some of the frustrations are, you're not the only one. That other people are experiencing similar things. And it can also be very satisfying and gratifying to know that sometimes problems arise and it isn't anybody's fault because the tendency is to wonder, what did I do wrong? And I want to end by telling you that I was able to discover that was what happened with my friend Susan in high school. From the time I graduated from high school, I just wanted to find out why she stopped talking to me. And I started trying to find her pretty soon, 5 or 6 years after we graduated. I knew what college she had gone to, but they had no records of her in the Alumni Association. She was not a member of my Alumni Association. When the internet came around, I was really thrilled. I started Googling her. Nothing. Of course, women get married and they change their last names, so they can't be found. From the moment I decided I was going to write a book about friendship, I made up my mind, I am going to find her and I'm going to solve this mystery because otherwise the book won't be complete. I had finished the book. I had a first draft and I still hadn't found her. And I had a friend who was very good at finding relatives through immigration records. And I remembered that Susan's family had immigrated to the United States from Iraq. I thought she was born in this country, but I knew that her family and she had a number of much older siblings, were all born in Iraq. So I gave him the name and her age. Friday night, I had dinner with him, told him the problem. Sunday morning, he had found her brother. She, it turns out, had been born in Iraq as well. She was 7 when they came here. Her name was Suad. She had been given the name Susan. Well, luckily she had brothers. Brothers don't change their names. So he had the name of her brothers, the name of her parents. He found a foundation in the name of the parents the brother administered, and he gave his email. I was so excited, my hands were trembling, and I sent him an email. He answered almost immediately with a CC to Susan, and of course, a new last name. And I began composing my email to her. And it was one of the hardest things I ever wrote because I thought maybe she still doesn't want to talk to me. So I was trying to be really careful and circumspect in composing this. But while I was still working on it, I got an email from her. And an hour later, 54 years after she stopped talking to me, we were talking on the phone. And the first thing she said was, "It was my brother who made me stop talking to you." Not the brother that I had contacted, another brother. And he was much older. This is a very traditional Iraqi family. Older brothers have a lot of power over younger sisters. And the family was very, very strict. She was only supposed to be either in school or at home. She was telling her family she was in the library studying, and she was going to Greenwich Village with me. This is New York City. And her brother, apparently, she said what her brother said was, I had too much influence over her. And that if she didn't stop seeing me, he would tell their parents what she was doing, and there would be hell to pay. So she felt she had no alternative but to listen. And so it was, and I've seen her since, and we've been able to renew our friendship, so it's a wonderful, happy ending. But I had already written a paragraph in the book in which I said, when people are cut off, they start wondering, what did I do to deserve this? And sometimes it wasn't anything you did. And sometimes it was something about the person who cut you off. She was going through something. She was cutting everybody off. And I said, if it's a young person who still lives with guardians or parents, sometimes they're the ones who make you the kid cut it off. Often for very good reason, and often, though they may not realize it, because they're jealous. And Susan actually said, he told me it was because I had too much influence over her, but she said, I think he was just jealous. So, I'm stopping there on the positive note that it's a sign of how deep, how significant, and meaningful friendships can be. We do have a few minutes for questions. Yeah, one or two at least. Questions? Comments?
Hope I can phrase this properly. We often hear about how men are hierarchical in their interactions and women are more horizontal. Do you think that if that's assuming that's true, that's what's a factor underlying why women tend to tell things to each other that men never tell to each other?
I think it plays a role. One of the kind of main points, you might say, in my book, You Just Didn't Understand, was that women will walk away from a conversation saying, did this bring us closer or push us farther apart? Obsession with closeness doesn't mean you always want to be close, but that's what you're asking. And men will walk away from the same conversation asking, did this put me in a one-up or a one-down position? So yes, I think there definitely is a sense in which telling about problems, telling about something that bothers you, you can feel puts you in a one-down position. I'll just give a quick example from my parents. My mother noticed my father was sort of holding his arm in a funny way. She asked, what's wrong? Oh, my arm hurts. How long has it been hurting you? Just a couple weeks. And she was devastated. What am I, chopped liver? If your arm is hurting, you should tell me. So I asked my father, why didn't you tell her? And he said, first of all, I was always raised to be protective of women. Huh? What did that have to do with anything? He explained she would worry. Why make her worry? But then he said, also, if he tells her, he'll be coming up in the elevator, and a woman he has never seen before in his life will say, Eli, how's your arm? And he said, that's not the image I want to project.
I'm wondering if this is something for further research, but given the reliance on the media now and all the changes in our world now, the impact on friendships, there seems to be a larger divide, or there have been more separations of friendships because of what's happening contextually in the world with politics. And I'm just wondering if that's come up in your classes and how you're thinking about that.
It has come up when I did the interviews was before that, but it has come up in conversations, yeah. People will often value friendships with people that have a lot of differences, different opinions, different lives, but then there can be something that you just feel is so unacceptable that you don't want to be friends. And absolutely, not just friendships with families. People who didn't want to go home for the holidays in December because of the way their families had voted, and that they felt so angry about it that they didn't feel they could broach that divide. So I think it is one of the sad repercussions of the situation.
How about texting and conversations?
Texting.
Because they aren't really talking.
Actually, I don't take the position that texting isn't really talking.
Okay.
A lot of what I write in there is I take the side of the kids and I defend them. I'm influenced very much by my students. Girls and women will use texting to have conversations and to keep in touch. Older people will come into me, they're texting and they're in the next room. One of my students explained to me, she was pretty good friends with a certain girl. Now they live together. They text each other more now that they're living together. It isn't about, I have information to convey. You know, and you just don't understand, I talked about rapport talk and report talk. Report talk, you have information to convey. Rapport talk, it's about being connected. They text each other all the time to stay connected. It's this meta message that you want to know what's happening in your friend's life all the time. So if you were walking with your friend and you saw something interesting and you'd elbow her and say, look at that. Now you take a picture and you send it to her, and it's like elbowing her and saying, look at that. You don't have to wait till the end of the day to have the end of day conversation.